Did you feel at the time of this first commission that it was possible to earn a living as an artist?
No, I don't think the idea really occurred to me. My main idea was to gain experience, and I couldn't help painting. I painted from morning till night.
The great Australian painter, Hans Heysen. Hans Heysen is the subject of today's verbatim. He was born in Germany in 1877, migrating to Adelaide with his family at the age of 6. By the time he left school in 1892, a boy of 14, he was already aware that art would mean everything to him. Over the next 70-odd years, his output would be prodigious, his admirers many, and his sales consistent. Probably more than any other artist, Heysen changed the way that Australia saw the gum tree, as for many, many years his eye was closely trained on the landscapes of his beloved Adelaide Hills and Flinders Ranges. Heysen died in 1968 at the age of 90. 5 years before, not long after the death of his wife, he gave this interview to the ABC's Cliff Neat. The story begins right back in the 19th century, when a local businessman approached an unhappy young artist driving his father's produce cart around the streets of Adelaide.
So Hans, looking back over your long career as an artist, at what point did you feel that, well, this is it, I'm on my own?
Well, I was really excited when travelling along Grenfell Street in my father's produce van, I was pulled up by a Mr. Pascoe, who had a second-hand dealer's establishment in Weymouth Street, and he made me the offer, how about coming along and painting a series for me and leaving your father's cart. Naturally, I was terribly excited at the offer and the opportunity of getting away from a job which I certainly did not appreciate.
Now, how did you set about this first painting contract, if we might call it that?
Well, of course, I thought the matter over, and my best plan was to go out to nature and paint directly from nature. So I packed up and went to Mount Barker, which was where I had sketched before, settled in to an old house up on the hill, surrounded by pine trees, no furniture of any kind, and so I started work there. My bedding was on the floor, but I was quite happy as long as I could work outside and work at an occupation or a job, whatever you like to call it, which seemed to be natural to me, and I enjoyed every moment that I was free to work under those conditions.
Now, apart from Mr. Pascoe, were any other local people interested in your work at all?
At that time, I had a brother-in-law who had a tobacconist shop in Rundle Street, exhibited my odd pieces of work of mine in his hair-cutting saloon. And in that saloon there was a big open space which he thought he would like to have filled with a painting of mine. So he asked me to fill the space, which amounted to about a 6 feet by 4 canvas. This I did of an Australian scene. And in the course of events, Mr. Davidson of E.S. Wiggins' Son, who frequented the shop, saw this painting and was very interested and offered to buy it. And with it he also interested 3 other men, Adelaide men, who asked me one evening to come round and discuss an idea they had of sending me to Europe to study. It was the very thing that I had been working for right along. And although it was a wonderful adventure for a boy, really a boy who'd never left Adelaide and the suburbs, but I jumped at the chance, and eventually everything was arranged for me to leave Adelaide and take up my study, to further my studies in Paris.
What were the terms of their offer to you?
The terms were naturally there was some compensation. The work that I would do in the period would revert to these 4 men who guaranteed my study in Paris. This I naturally did, forwarding the work to Adelaide about every 6 months.
Where did you study in Paris? Under whom did you study?
I studied at Julien's Academy in the Rue de Dragon. We worked from 8 to 12, studying from the nude. In the afternoons, I used to go out sketching along the Seine or anywhere which interested me. And the evenings were spent at Calarossi's Academy, where we put in another 3 hours, drawing from the nude also, and making quick studies, about 20-minute studies.
How long did you spend in Paris altogether?
Altogether, I suppose I spent about 3 years, which was followed by 12 months in Italy.
Were you influenced in any way by the contemporary artists of that period?
No, I was not, really. They hadn't really gained public support at all, the so-called modern artists. There was Monet, who was gradually gaining favor, Pissarro, who was not really outrageous as the public placed them, Sicily. Oh, there were quite a number who were practicing then what was called the Impressionistic school of painting, that is, the division of tones.
What style of painting were you working towards in those days?
I was not really interested in any particular style that was going at the time. My main idea was to express just as I felt. I employed, a style which seemed to be natural to my idea of placing onto canvas what I saw. Certainly interested in just placing onto paper and canvas an idea or what impressed me in color, form, and subject matter.
Would there be many paintings in existence today of this period that you spent in Paris?
Nearly all the work that I did at that period was sent out to Adelaide, and they were distributed amongst the men who had made it possible for me to study in Paris. They must be widely spread, but I don't exactly know where they went to.
Now, Sir Hans, after your years of studying in Paris, you spent some time in Italy. How long were you there?
Yes, I was fully 12 months in Italy. My real object was to go to Florence and study in the academy there, to continue my studies. But when I realized the poor quality of work that was being turned out in the Academy, I thought it better to spend my time studying the pictures in the various churches, frescoes, and of course the work of the old masters at the Uffizi. There I painted my only copy of the old masters, a baby by Titian, which is now in the Adelaide Art Gallery.
How did you apply these years of study in France after you returned to Australia?
I returned to Australia 1903, and of course I had, while abroad, conceived many paintings that I was going to do when I got home. But I did start on a 6-foot by 4 canvas of a pastoral subject with cows and gums and a maiden driving the cows with ducks. And that was really the only painting, excepting one of the interior of St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice, that I painted from all those ideas that I had, which I was going to do, but did not. I went straight into the bush and painted Mystic Morn out at the meadows. And from that day, I think that Australia captured me for the second time, and I didn't think of any continental painting.
Mystic Morn was the painting with which you won the Wynne Prize for the first time.
Yes, I exhibited Coming Home, which was conceived after George Mason in England's pastoral painter, and Mystic Morn at the same time in Sydney at the Society of Artists. I think they came as something new, especially coming from a South Australian artist who were in the back blocks. And they gave me the Wynne Prize for Mystic Morn, and the National Gallery bought the pastoral subject, Coming Home. These two sales really put me on my feet and gave me more confidence in my work. Also, they allowed me to think of marrying. This I did in 1904. I was then teaching at the Adelaide Steamship Buildings, which was where I had my rooms, and this continued on for about 4 years until 1908, when I held quite a successful exhibition at the Guildhall in Melbourne, which was opened by Mr. Deacon. With this, the proceeds and success, we at once packed up and off into the country. And having known Hounddorf before naturally led us to try our luck and find a house in Hounddorf and take up what I call art seriously. There was a group of gums, white gums, on the top of the hill just outside of Hounddorf, which captured my fascination, and I think they were the origin of a great number of paintings which I then painted, and which have been scattered, some of which went to Scotland, America, and England.
And you lived and painted in the Hounddorf district ever since?
And yes. We lived directly in Hounddorf for about 5 years when we had the opportunity of buying a home just about a mile outside the township, and from that day we have lived there.
How many major art prizes have you won during your career?
I've had the Wynne Prize for 9 times, the Crouch Prize twice, but otherwise I haven't really competed in any of the big competitions.
What kind of artist would you call yourself?
I call myself an impressionist or a representational artist. I paint just what I feel appeals to me in color and form and subject matter, effects of light and shade, wonderful skies, the growth and character of trees, in fact anything that appeals to me in nature.
This has been the kind of thing you've always wanted to paint, as from a very early age. Has there been any time at all in your life that you've lost interest in these things?
No, I have not. I think my interest has increased more than not lessened. I see more the beauty in growth, in life, and the character of things. The outlines or the geology, or you might say the shapes and colors of the mountains in the Flinders, they make a never-ending appeal to me. I love them, and I love drawing and painting them.
Now, looking back over your many years in the art world, what do you consider have been the most significant periods of your life there?
When I look over the many years, I should say when I was about 65, that's 20 years ago, I was more deeply impressed with things. That is, they made an emotional appeal which stirred my senses. Very often when I came across a scene which appealed to me, made a sudden appeal, I'd be so moved that I couldn't draw. I'd shiver all over with excitement, which would have to be steadied down before I could make an attempt to record what I saw and felt.
Why do you feel it was so long in your life before you experienced this real emotion?
No, I certainly felt at odd times long before I was 65, but I think I had reached my maturity at 65. I could more easily express and record what I saw and felt about that period.
Do you still experience this today?
I think I do, but it comes more rare. I don't go out into nature so often because I find that I can produce more easily, more vividly, things from memory in my studio, where I can work in peace and not be disturbed by local influences when working outside in nature.
Do you find any difficulty in painting today?
It doesn't come quite so easily, I will say. The impulses are less strong, and there's less vitality. But on the days when I feel fit, I go to work in earnest again as usual.
Are your techniques and your technical capabilities still as strong today as they ever were?
Well, that's hard to answer. My impulses don't come so often, and they are less vigorous and feeling less vigorous, your technique fags. It hasn't got that certainty of touch that probably you experienced earlier.
Now, looking back over the many years that have gone before you, do you have any regrets at all? Is there anything that you would have liked to have done that you didn't do?
No, I don't think I have any regrets whatsoever. I would just repeat my life as I have spent in the past. Of course, I would like to have done more. I think we all feel like that when we get old. But I think the life of an artist is the most wonderful life.
Sir Hans Heysen was knighted in 1959 in recognition of his services to Australian art. Although his work had come to be seen as a little static and unsophisticated as the 20th century rolled on, he was honoured to the end for his draftsmanship, his extraordinary productivity, and his early concern for the survival of both the environment and rural life. Today's Verbatim has been produced by me, Jane Connors, with technical production by David Bates, and thanks to the ABC's Radio Archives.